Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to have you at Texas A&M International University. My name is Christopher Maynard. I have the honor and pleasure of serving as the president of Texas A&M International University. And on behalf of the entire university community, welcome to both our in-person and virtual attendees to the 30th Annual Western Hemispheric Trade Conference. So welcome. Thank you. For 3 decades, this conference has brought together a dynamic learning community of faculty, student scholars, and industry leaders to examine the forces shaping trade and commerce across the Americas. That longevity reflects not only the relevance of these conversations, but also the university's enduring commitment to advancing dialogue on global economic issues. Situated at a vital international crossroads, TAMIU is uniquely positioned to engage in discussions that bridge nations, markets, and ideas. This conference reflects that mission, bringing real-world trade challenges to the forefront while exploring the economic, political, and social connections that define our hemisphere. Last night's keynote offered valuable insights into the complexities of global supply chains, their vulnerabilities, and the factors that will shape their future. Tomorrow, we will turn our attention to the digital economy and the challenge of designing antitrust frameworks that protect competition while sustaining innovation. As important as these topics are, the true value of this conference lies in the exchange of ideas. I encourage all participants, especially our students, to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and fully engage with one another throughout this program. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our distinguished speakers who are sharing their expertise and to the faculty and staff of the A.R. Sanchez Jr. School of Business for their leadership in organizing this event. We also gratefully acknowledge our sponsors and partner whose support helped make this conference possible. To our guests, we are honored to welcome participants joining us from across the nation and around the world. Your presence enriches this dialogue and underscores the importance of collaboration in addressing shared challenges. Thank you for joining us for this event. As we mark this 30th year, we do so with an eye toward the future, one defined by innovation, interdependence, and opportunity across the Western Hemisphere. Once again, welcome to Texas A&M International University and the 30th Annual Western Hemispheric Trade Conference. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Luis Perez-Batres, Dean of the A.R. Sanchez Jr. School of Business, to introduce our luncheon panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all friends. What we do only for ourselves dies with us. What we do for the benefit of others remains immortal. Words by Albert Pine. It is my honor to introduce 2 outstanding academics who, beyond their many personal achievements, embody that idea in their work. They elevate others. Let me begin with Dr. Silvia Gómez Anson. Dr. Gómez Anson is professor of finance at the University of Oviedo, Spain. She's both a leading scholar and a renowned builder of institutions whose knowledge and stewardship extend across Europe. I had the opportunity to meet Silvia this last year, May 2025, at the Ibero-American Academy of Management in Madrid. We shared a doctoral session together, worked closely with doctoral students, and quickly became fast friends. When we began engaging in financial literacy, I immediately reached out to her. Silvia, it is truly an honor to have you. Dr. Dolinsky is Assistant Professor of Practice and Director of Finance Majors Professional Development at the University of Florida, Warrington College of Business. I first met Max in the fall of 2017 at Central Michigan University. Although we come from different disciplines, I quickly realized he has a unique ability to connect with students and industry. I like to say that he is kind of a whisperer who brings people together and make things happen. When we began developing the Banking Academy, he was one of my first calls. Max, we're truly delighted to have you. Let me briefly frame our conversation for today. Today's discussion sits at the intersection of financial literacy, talent development, and economic opportunity. Issues that are highly important for our region and the work that many of you here in the audience lead. We will move through a series of questions, alternating between our panelists, and then open up for discussion. The aim is to maintain a dynamic exchange. So without further ado, I introduce Silvia. Max, if you can join me, please. All right, so Dr. Gómez Anson, the topic of financial literacy resonates deeply in our community, and your work highlights this as a tool to reduce inequality. Based on your research, what differentiates financial education that merely informs from one that actually changes people's behavior in a lasting way?
Thank you very much, Dr. Perez Vázquez. Before answering your question, let me first thank you for your kind invitation. And it is truly a pleasure to be here at the 30th, the number is very impressive, annual Western Hemispheric Trade Conference, and to be part of this conversation at the Texas A&M International University. Thank you also to all the institutions that make this conference possible. Let me also thank you, President Christopher Maynard, and you, Luis, Dean of the AIR Sanchez Junior Business School. It is especially nice to share this panel with you, and I would also like to greet my fellow panelist, Dr. Dolinsky. So let me try to answer the question that Dr. Perez Vázquez has posted by briefly asking ourselves other questions. First, are we financial literate worldwide? Do you know people that are not financial literate? The answer is that worldwide, this is a challenge. Only 1/3 of the population worldwide is financial literate. So second, is financial literacy linked to inequality? And we all know that the answer is yes, because financial literacy is systematically unequal among countries, regions, and among individuals. For instance, it is lower among individuals with lower income and lower levels of education, among other characteristics. So, does this matter? We all know that it does. And this is why we are talking today about financial literacy. Because financial literacy is only linked to outcomes. Actually, individuals with lower literacy are more likely, for example, to face higher borrowing costs, lower savings, and weaker financial resilience. And this is why we need financial education. And this brings us directly to your question, Dr. Perez Vázquez. What kind of financial education is more effective? Obviously, the one that not only informs us, but also changes our behaviors. What differentiates financial education that informs from one that actually changes behavior? Well, for me, is that behavior change in financial education is designed around decisions. It is not only informative, it connects knowledge to action. And here, in my opinion, there is an additional thing that we have to take into account, that in order to change behavior, we have to understand ourselves and know our cognitive biases, and we have a lot of behavioral biases. So this means asking ourselves questions such as, do I tend to prioritize immediate needs or rewards over long-term goals? What situations lead me to spend more than I intended? Do I use a budget or do I rely on intentions? Do I understand the risk behind the financial products that I buy? Okay. Do I know the monthly cost of my debt? Okay. And that means that we should know that financial decisions are influenced by psychological biases, emotions, and behavioral patterns. So, what does this mean in practice? That programs are more effective if they are targeted, if they are practical, if they are relevant to the life situation of participants, engaging and embedded in real context. And how do we achieve this? First, simplicity, okay? What works best are simple rules that you can actually apply. For example, saving a fixed percentage of your income or separating spending and saving. And that's simple, right? Second, timing. Education is more effective when you need it, when you are going to choose a credit card, when you are going to make your first loan. Third, behavioral design. This means structuring your choices in a way that helps you make better decisions. For example, establishing reminders like messages that help you follow through on intentions and avoid procrastination. I always tell myself that I am a person that procrastinates a lot. Okay. Fourth, sustained engagement. One lecture, as we teachers know, is not enough. What really makes the difference is repeated interaction, okay? Financial coaching, workshops, etc. And finally, institutional embedding. When financial education is integrated into schools, universities, workplaces, or financial systems, it becomes part of your environment. I would like to highlight that you in Texas have some very nice examples of this. For example, you have some initiatives that integrate education directly into lending and mentoring relationships. So to summarize and to answer your question directly, maybe I should have started here. We could say that financial education that informs, transmits knowledge, and is of course important, but financial education that changes behavior, links knowledge to action, context, sustained engagement, and an understanding of behavioral biases is more important, even more important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Silvia. So I guess that we need to make ourselves aware and develop good habits with those insights. So we will follow suit. Now with the Banking Academy, Max, Dr. Dolinsky, our banking community cares deeply about developing future leaders. That's one of our expectations. As you know, the Sanchez School recently established a Banking Academy. From your experience, what distinguishes finance programs that truly prepare students for meaningful careers? In other words, what is the secret sauce?
Thank you, Luis, and thank you to your team for hosting me. You have exhibited incredible hospitality. I'm really floored by that. And in fact, I'm taking some pointers and going to bring them back to Florida of how we can host our speakers maybe at the same level. So thank you for that. Well, let me ask, let's see if anybody in the audience, it feels like, sharing or just yell it out. What is the enemy of progress and getting started with something? What is the enemy? Yell it out. What is it? Okay. What else? Ignorance. I'll give you a hint. It's a positive word, considered to be positive. Starts with a P. No? Was it? Passion. Almost. It's perfection. So actually perfection is the reason why I've seen this over and over again. Universities, colleges will not start a program yet because they keep waiting for the perfect moment to start. And oftentimes it's the leadership that wants to make sure that nothing's going to go wrong. Let's manage for the downside. Let's make sure there's no risk instead of focusing on the upside. And so I want to give credit where credit's due for starting the academy and jumping in there. It's and for the students, this is a lesson too. Do not let perfection steer you away from taking a chance and just going for it. There are a dozen of ways to start a program like Banking Academy and for them to be successful. So honestly, number one thing is just get going. And I see again, I've just from speaking with your students, I can already see that you guys, you're running with it. So kudos on that. Then bringing all the stakeholders together. I mean, case in point, look around. You have the industry, you have your sponsors, you have your faculty, staff, you have all the students here. I think this is key, and this is, and you guys discovered it's one of the secret ingredients is you just need to bring folks together, because that's where opportunities will arise. That's where things happen. So so kudos on that. If I were to really zero in on so now we described what makes solid programs, but if you really want to go to the top, it's going to come down to the culture. And that one is a tough one to crack and understand. And oftentimes, if we are too focused on metrics, we will completely miss it. So yesterday at dinner, I mentioned to our group is I like Goodhart's law that says the moment a metric becomes the target, it ceases to exist to be a good metric. Any metric you give me, if you're just trying to measure it as an observer, whichever entity you're observing, if they make it their target, it's not going to be what you think it is. And our speaker yesterday kind of shared some of these examples with the audience, right? So I would say, yes, of course, metrics, outcomes matter, and we'll want that. But if you really want to go to the top, you have to focus on the culture. You have to instill the culture of excellence among the students, among the community, just to expect that, but really it's among the students. So for the students, you all need to be doing what's right, working hard, like even when no one's watching. That's why there are some things, and I'll touch on them as we go, but there are some things like the 7 a.m. club, like what time do you wake up and get going? If I'm a student that I had this once, student misses a 10 o'clock meeting with me and then apologizes and says that the alarm clock didn't go off. I'm like, if you miss a 10 a.m. meeting because the alarm clock didn't go off, you have a much bigger problem, right? Like you need to be, and like for the students, look around at your bankers. If you're sitting at the bankers at the table, just ask them what time their day starts. I bet you there's not a single professional here who's working in banking who wakes up at 10 a.m., right? It just doesn't exist. So those things, they will not be anywhere else. But yeah, so those things will not show up anywhere else on the metrics. It's pure culture. And then you will now, I'll say the things that I value in the culture, but I think you was discussing with President Chris about how, you just need to understand what institution you are and what is the culture of excellence means to you. And it will differ from institution to institution. But generally, you will want to have grit, where students are just working really hard. You will need to have growth mindset. A growth versus fixed mindset. I didn't even, if it's the first time you're hearing it, you need to look into it. I didn't know what this was until my late 20s. I grew up with a fixed mindset, which actually made me so much more sensitive to this, that we need to educate our students about growth mindset. We need to instill it in the culture. That means the students are not afraid to fail, especially in front of the dean, in front of the faculty, in front of industry professionals. They need to be okay with failing, because that's part of progress. And so that goes hand in hand with growth mindset. Again, that's a tough one, and it's going to be on the leadership to really instill that in the students. And then humility is a big one. I sensed so far students have plenty of that here. This does kind of vary from culture to culture. Luis, when we were at Central Michigan, I've seen plenty of, there was a lot of humility for this in the students. There I felt like we needed to instill confidence in them. Then I went to some other schools, and where I'm at now, I feel like we need to teach humility to the students. They have plenty of confidence there, and it's a harder lesson to deliver, but nevertheless as important. So I would say, just based on so far my interactions, I feel like you have the humility, just be sure that as success kicks in, which it will, it's already starting to, as success kicks in, and then the students will be walking around saying, I'm in a banking academy, let's just remember that where we started, and let's maintain that level of humility, because you need that for continued growth.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Max. Very appreciative of those insights, and we will follow through. In fact, I think this is being recorded. So, as a follow-up, in your work with industry partners, what is the most consistent disconnect you see between what students or programs bring and what employers expect? And then how can you bridge that gap?
Well, anytime you have a gap in expectations and reality, I mean, there are two ways you can solve it. You can lower expectations, right? That's not what we really want to do here, but I'll start with that because there is some truth to that. Setting the right expectations with the industry, with all your banking community is important. And where you're going with this is the students will keep getting more and more excited about the academy. They'll be talking about it as their high school students looking at that MU, and they'll start to join as freshmen, sophomores. So you'll do a great job on that. I'm just kind of like forecasting where you're heading. And you will need to communicate with the industry so that you all don't forget that you may be talking to freshmen, sophomores who haven't taken a finance class yet. And I see it all the time. And so again, for me, it was kind of like a wake-up call that for the program, you will need to keep educating the industry. So for the industry, just also be like on the lookout for that. You need to understand the program well enough and who the students are. So setting the right expectations is important. But then in terms of elevating the students, I mean, there's going to be, so one is for the students, just know that whenever you're applying for the job, employers are not looking for the best person in that field or even for that role. I can tell you for the bankers, when you're looking for an analyst role, I can tell you Luis can do that job. And, maybe he'll need to brush up a little bit on some of the things he took in school, but I can promise you his communication, his organization, all of his skills will be, you would grab Luis for your role if you think he'd stay. But at the same time, I know if Luis submit his resume in your application for an entry-level role, he would be rejected, right? And it's because he's not the right fit. And so for the students, you need to remember that employers are actually not looking for the very best candidate, the most skilled candidate. They're looking for the right fit. And it's very different because the moment you understand that they're looking for the right fit, when you're speaking to somebody, you need to first you want to understand if that's the right job for you, but then you need to just convince them that you're the best fit for the role. And it's going to be so custom. It's going to vary from employer to employer. So I think that's where the gap is. And sometimes it's on employers. They make that mistake, so just be cognizant of that. You also should be looking for the right fit if you're not yet. And what will happen, what I see where the disappointment takes place and the gap takes place, is that they'll hire somebody and the student is just not the right fit, and they may leave after 6 months or something like that. So, and then the overall, I would bring it back to trust equation. So if you're in banking, a book I recommend is Trusted Advisor. It was really written, it's a couple decades old, so it became a little outdated, but they updated it. So Trusted Advisor talks about how is trust determined, what defines trust. And there are 4 things that go into it. You have credibility, which students generally, you'll do really well on that. Anytime you have some kind of banking academy, you'll have the credibility. Then plus reliability, that's where students generally lack, and that's where the gap also takes place. Is reliability means following through. If you spoke to an industry professional, will you connect afterward? Will you thank them for speaking with you? Will you do what you said? So plus reliability, plus intimacy. That's an interesting one. So it's really connecting with either with your client, right? So we're talking about trust of relationships. So for the book was written more for the bankers than for the students. So it's really the message for the audience here is if you feel like you lack trust with your clients, think which of those it is. Is it reliability plus credibility, plus intimacy, how close they feel like they can speak with you and maybe share their problems or share their vulnerabilities about the business or even personally. So that's 3. And then you divide all of that by self-orientation. So it's in the denominator. So if it's high, it's bad, right? So self-orientation, and with your clients, if they feel like you are thinking about yourself and what helps your interests, that will hurt the trust. And the best thing you can do to earn that trust is you bring down your self-orientation and you make it about your client. Or again, this translates into any relationship. This translates to the students who are trying to earn the trust during their internship, is you need to demonstrate to your employers that your self-orientation is low, that you're focused on the team, you're focused on everyone else around you, and you're not making it about yourself.
Thank you very much, Max. So if I understood correctly, it is about solving our problems. I mean, you bring the highly talented student to the fall with the bankers. It is about solving their needs. I mean, towards the fit within the position, and try to understand where they are at as far as confidence. And you mentioned in the previous one humility, and in this case, how is that they can advance that goal? So that I appreciate the insight. Following in that topic, Silvia, building on that connection between academia and industry. And this is a little bit more of an institutional perspective that is also very needed. Where do you see the most critical gaps in financial literacy today? And how are those gaps quietly translated into long-term inequality?
So thank you very much. This is also a very important question, and in order to answer it, I will rely on what we know in the literature that we have about financial literacy. And the gaps are several at the level of pure financial concepts, digital gaps, behavioral gaps, exposure gaps, and they translate through various means into long-term inequality. So let me talk about the critical gaps, and starting with the knowledge gaps, as we have here quite many students, okay? There are 3 questions that are usually considered the core financial questions, okay? And they relate to how money grows, and this is the concept of, you can raise your hands and answer it. When you are try to understand how money grows, you relate to compound interest, right? The difference between simple interest and compound interest. Then, how purchasing power changes, and this is the concept of inflation. And then how to manage risk, and this is the concept of risk diversification. So now think about your relatives, people surrounding you, whether they are able, all of them, to answer these questions. And as we saw, about only 1/3 of the population is able to answer these questions correctly. So now think about in Texas, what is the situation in Texas? And I'll give you some figures. I'm sorry, I'm a finance person, so I always give figures, okay? So for example, in Texas, only 49% of individuals correctly answered an inflation question. And when it comes to diversification, only 35% of the persons in the survey in Texas answered that question. So it's a reality that we have a knowledge gap. But we also have a behavioral gap, because there are differences in how people actually manage their finances. For example, in Texas also, about 48% of the individuals report carrying credit card balances and paying interest. And this means that they don't pay their full balance each month, and therefore they pay higher interest rates, okay? And for example, 41% report using non-bank borrowing methods, which are more costly, okay? Then we have a digital gap, and financial services are increasingly online, okay? For example, my mother, she doesn't manage this at all, okay? And fourth, we have an exposure gap. because we have unequal access to financial education itself. And this depends on factors such as school curricula, family background, access to information and guidance. For example, if I think about my education in Spain, at home, it was when we never talked about money, okay? And if you talked about money, they told you were impolite, okay? So we are not educated in this. And well, so even more important, these gaps are not randomly distributed. They are linked to socioeconomic characteristics, as we have already talked about. So then the second part of your question, Luis, how do these gaps translate into long-term inequality? Well, there are several channels. To name some, first, retirement and long-term saving. Individuals with higher financial literacy are more likely to plan, and planning is strongly associated with wealth accumulation. Second, debt and credit decisions. Individuals with lower financial literacy are more likely to rely on high costs, as we have already said, high cost credit, misunderstand the repayment structures, and delay saving. Third, participation in wealth-building assets. Financial literacy affects whether individuals invest, how they diversify, and how they manage risk. So the key point is, the largest gaps are concentrated among individuals who can least afford costly mistakes, and in the concepts that have the greatest long-term consequences. And this is why we need so much financial education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. So, so really, certainly this is about societal impact. And that is one of the things that being affiliated with a university, all of us that is here certainly at Texas A&M International University, is that we are helping elevate our communities. So thank you very much for that. And once that primer is set, as when we would like to, let's say, paint a wall or something like that, you need a primer, so a particular set of expectations on education, and then you can elevate towards, building a banking academy, and then starting to progress that way. So thank you very much for that, those insights. Now let's move from diagnosing the gap to actually building a system that works. So this is more of an encompassing type of questions while we will continue moving the conversation forward. So Max, how do you design programs, that is student organizations, partnerships, experiential learning, so they are not just effective once, but repeatable and sustainable over time?
Thank you. Yeah, that's it's a question of continuing to think about, and also those are different. Like to make something sustainable and systematic. I mean, you will need a team, right? You will need to put the right people in place. I mean, it comes down to anything. I'm sure if you're a banker and you're looking at, you have two options. You can give your loan to somebody that has an excellent idea, and for expansion, for example, it's your existing client, they have an excellent idea to expand, but there it's, idea level A, but in terms of team, it's like team C. They're not as reliable, things have happened, the ethics may be on a margin. So it's your one client, and then you have another client. Now, great idea, you'd give it a C. But they want to expand, but their team is just phenomenal. They're just an A team, super reliable, credible, all of that. Which one are you going to go with, right? And I would say most of you, if not all of you, would go with the B, because they did with the second option, because team is what's going to drive your success. And so you have a great dean here, you have a great president from what I'm hearing, so you have the leadership that's backing you, but now you need to get the right team in place that's going to drive it forward. So just like don't underestimate the importance of that. And then to make it scalable, that's a tough one, Luis, that I am continuing to struggle with myself. because in fact with the academy you will have that challenge. Right now I think your academy is around 40, 50 people, 40, 50 students. As the demand for it grows, if you were to just let it scale, I mean, it can become a couple hundred or more, and then you may lack resources for that, to accommodate that. And when I say resources, it's not just financial, it's even access to the industry, right? All of that. So you need to be, it's going to be a challenge. And again, going back to if you have the right team, they will figure it out. But it's a balance between you need to be selective on one hand, and when I say selective, it's not the highest SAT score. It's really just those who demonstrate, students who demonstrate they have the grit, they have reliability, they'll follow through, they'll wake up and show up at 6 a.m. on school, at school if you need them to. So that level of selectivity versus scalability, because you'll be tempted to accommodate more and more students. It's really hard. One of the hardest things in my job is to turn students away that are coming to you and asking you to be a part of the program. They're asking you for help, and I've made that mistake more often than not. I made the mistake of saying yes, and then what I see happens later is when I'm not being selective with a student, it's because they don't have the track record. And yes, I mean, I have numerous examples. I'm like replaying in my head right now as I'm describing this. I would sit down at a coffee shop with a student. I want to help him. He didn't get accepted into our program initially. I'm hearing his story. We accept him, and then just he doesn't follow through. He just not as driven at the moment, or not as interested. And so that's gonna be a tough one. I'm gonna let you and your team figure out the balance between scalability and being selective. I'm just gonna put out there that it's not as easy. Just like, hey, let's accommodate more students. Let's make it bigger. That's a mistake I've made multiple times, and still kind of continuing to make that because I'm tempted to accommodate more students. And for student leaders, that's also something to be mindful of when you will have your program managers who are saying no to you. Who are saying no to some of your peers trying to get into the program. They are seeing a bigger picture. You need to trust them. It's part of the process, but that balance can be a tough one.
Thank you very much for those insights, Max. So yes, definitely it is about making it, if I understand correctly, is that those calls, tough calls, can make the program more sustainable. So thank you very much for that wisdom. And so Silvia, from that perspective, so going back to earlier comments on, while this is about specific programs, it seems that for society, the financial literacy aspect, what we're talking about, has these repercussions. So in other words, we're having preparing students, yes, directly in the programs, but also those who are not yet in the program with financial literacy, we can reach out to them so that they can be better prepared. Probably yes for the long term, but that is, so let me ask you the question. So Silvia, from that perspective, what role should universities realistically play in advancing financial literacy at a societal level beyond individual courses or programs? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I think this question is very linked to what the idea we have of a university. Universities have a responsibility with the community, with the society, that goes far beyond delivering individual courses. We all know that. And while their role is really to act as anchors of knowledge and drivers of societal progress. Well, this was already the idea of Fray Luis de Leon in the Salamanca of the 16th century, okay? Or the idea of Humboldt when about what a modern university should be. And it's also recognized in Tamiu's mission, as the president was telling us before. In that sense, well, when we talk about financial literacy, universities should not treat it as a specific subject, okay, but as a public good that supports informed decision-making and economic participation. So what does this mean in practice? First, we should act as knowledge hubs, generating research and translating our research into insights. Second, We should engage in knowledge transfer and outreach, working with schools, communities, NGOs, public institutions, firms. While in places like La Ruido, this is particularly relevant. Universities serve as bridges between institutions and communities and may bring financial knowledge to populations that may otherwise have limited access. Third, universities should integrate financial literacy across disciplines, not only in business schools, okay? Our students, all our students, should be financial literate. Fourth, universities should act as platforms for experimentation and innovation. And this is very important. We should test new approaches, okay? We do research, we should do research about the new approaches and how to teach financial education. And fifth, universities should recognize that students themselves can be active participants in driving change. And here, I would like to talk to you about one initiative that we have started 3 years ago at our business and economics faculty. We train our students. Well, we bring people from the central bank, the Spanish central bank, from the Spanish Security Exchange Commission, from financial institutions, and they train our students in how to teach financial education. And then our students go to high schools and teach financial education. And this is a win-win situation for the high school students and for our students. And when we pass the evaluations, what we have found is that the high school students learn more with their peers, university students, than with us, and they like their peers more, okay? So I think we should engage our students as active actors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. That was a great insight as bringing the capabilities, the talent of our current students for societal impact. So thank you very much. And in that sense, I remember this question was inspired by something that happened to me a few years ago when I was talking with a friend, and then he was telling me, "Hey, Luis, do you remember when we were playing basketball a few years ago?" I mean, yes, we were in high school. And I said, "Yes, I remember that." And he says, I oftentimes think that we're at the same age, and I want to know, I often think, what is that I want to do when I grow up? And so, at our age. And so, to some extent, I would like to extend that mindset to our students and maybe some other that are a little bit older, as far as what would you do upon listening to this conversation about changing or doing something a little bit differently? So to that end, let me shift gears slightly and make it more personal. So Silvia, your work spans governance, financial literacy, and family business, with influence across academia and policy. Looking back, what moments or decisions most shaped your impact? And what would you share with us aspiring to follow a similar path? Do tell.
So thank you very much. Let me try to answer this question briefly. Well, talking about oneself is not easy, okay? And I think that my academic career, Luis is a friend, but my academic career has been modest. So looking back, I would say that I have been very fortunate, and that what has shaped most my journey has been education as a foundation, not only in terms of knowledge, but in fostering curiosity, encouraging questions, developing creativity, and strengthening social values such as responsibility and a commitment to contributing to society. So if I had to highlight aspects, I will highlight the following points. Be curious and outward looking for students. Try to choose topics that matter. Engage beyond academia. And listen and collaborate. And let me explain very briefly Why I would like to highlight these points? Well, from early on, my training and experience were international. I went to a German school. I don't have a German background, although I'm blonde for a Spanish person, but I went to a German school in Spain, graduated from high school in the United States, up in Buffalo, New York, and later studied in Spain and Germany. That exposure helped me understand that many of the issues we study, whether corporate governance, family firms, or financial literacy, are deeply influenced by institutional and cultural context. And in that sense, it is particularly meaningful to be here in Laredo, a city that is inherently international. A second key element in my journey has been choosing research topics that are not only academically relevant, but also socially meaningful, areas where research can contribute to real-world decisions and public policy. And this is very much aligned with the mission of this university. And closely related to this is a strong commitment to knowledge transfer. Throughout my career, I have worked with public institutions, international organizations, firms, NGOs, and this connection between academia and practice is also reflected in the Banking Academy and the Western Hemispheric Trade Center. And another important aspect has been maintaining a continuous dialogue outside academia. Many research questions emerge not only from theory, but from engagement with practitioners, policymakers, and communities. Teaching has also played a central role in my journey. I am the third generation of teachers, so it's in the family. Staying in close contact with students helps ensure that research remains relevant and forward-looking. And finally, I would like to highlight the importance of collaboration. Much of my work has been developed with other professors and students from different disciplines, countries, and institutions. Complex problems, as we all know, require multiple perspectives. So summing up, I think we should connect research with real-world problems and build bridges between academia, institutions, and society. Not only think about citations, our index, etc. And for those of you who are students, I will encourage you to see your education not only as a preparation for a career, which is of course important, but as an opportunity to understand the world, to ask better questions and informed questions, and to position yourselves to make a meaningful impact, and especially in a place like this, where local realities are deeply connected to global dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. Thank you. Great answer. And my takeaway very quickly, let's keep our curiosity and be collaborative. By the way, Silvia lives very close to Laredo in Cantabria, yes. Right? So that is then what is the, for Dr. Dolinsky, Max, personal again. So much of your work has focused on building programs that translate into real opportunities for students while serving industry partners. When did you realize that you could impact students' lives and trajectories in such a meaningful way? Have you changed your approach?
Yeah, I had, there's one specific moment I can very much point to, even though it's been now almost 10 years, as PhD students reminded me this morning when we were discussing, they asked me, so when did you get your PhD? And I was like, 2017. And they were like, it's been almost 10 years. And I'm like, you know, I didn't realize that until you just said it. Time flies. But there was one unique moment. I was at Central Michigan. I am teaching the first finance course that students have to take. Now, that at this point, the student is a junior. That's a common challenge that many universities face is finance students do not start taking their first finance class until their junior year. And you're expected to interview for internships at least that early or maybe before then. So I had a student, and she was in my class. She was outstanding among a few others who were just absolutely phenomenal stars. And she got a chance to interview with an automotive company that's in Detroit. It was for a selective analyst role. They came in. Actually, I invited them to come to speak to my class. They came in. They told the students about it. She applied for the role, and they had a very intense interview process where there's a lot of technical questions about it. There's a case study. And here I had my student that I otherwise knew would be working really hard, has like all of the right qualities, I think, for the role, but just lacks the technical skills. She only had 4 weeks of classes at that point. I've only known her for a month. She only had imagine having 4 weeks of finance education and trying to go through an intense case study where you're doing a 3 statement analysis, and she was preparing so hard for it leading up to the interview that she almost got it. She made it to the final round. She almost got it, but she didn't. And that was, it was painful for me to see, but in times there's pain, you kind of see the opportunity. And I saw the opportunity is we need to have a program that will support those students, teach them those things outside of the class. Because once you do things out extracurricularly, different rules apply to you. At this point, you can be more robust, like with the banking academy. You can make decisions a lot quicker. You don't have to go through a committee and wait for 2 years for changes to take place. And so that's the benefit of the academy, which again, I'm excited to where it's going. I know that 1 year from now, it's going to be at a different level. And that's how we started our Michigan Finance Scholars Program. In fact, it took us about 3 weeks to start it. I was so pumped. I was like, let's go. I had an early vision of, I did not let perfection be the enemy of great. I said, let's just run for it. And we told the students about it. Within 3 weeks, we actually had an entrance exam, which I gave on a Friday at 8 in the morning. And administration told me, you shouldn't do that. Not you, I'm just, others. Administration told me you shouldn't do that because students will not show up. They'll say students don't come on a Friday morning at 8 a.m. It's just not a thing. And they're talking to me like I don't understand what the reality, and I do, but it's not what I want the reality to be. And I said, the students, if this were to work, the students that we want in our program will show up on a Friday at 8 a.m. We had about 30 students come in, take the exam. We were, it was a balance between being selective. I think we took in just over half, and we launched our program and we started running with it. Actually, no, I take that back. We took a lot more than half. I remember because, I remember having this conversation. The students were already also strong because, they kind of self-selected. There were students who didn't come because they heard there's an exam at 8 in the morning and they said, no, thanks. So that in itself is actually kind of like a selection, self-selection. You will see a lot of that with the programs. And I took those lessons to the University of Delaware, where we started the program as well. I've taken to University of Florida. But what that early experience and that early success, it gave me the confidence to really keep going and to be bold and to not do something just because it doesn't exist. And I will say that what was absolutely critical for our success of Michigan Finance Scholars Program, which is still going strong. You can look it up. I have my former colleague, Brett Taylor, he's still running it. It's still going strong. Same for University of Delaware. So we did make it sustainable, I'm proud to say. But the way we made it sustainable and the way we worked, it worked well. It was because of the industry. It was because of you guys. Because we had John Voigtman, you may remember him, and others who were just jumping in. They loved what we were doing. Just like you all, as you learn about the academy and other initiatives, I'm sure you will love what you'll see. And that's where do not underestimate the importance that the industry plays in this program. And that's the one the biggest commonality that I've taken from one program to the next to the one now. It's all about industry engagement is in the heart of it. It makes it sustainable. It gets students to keep going. It gets them excited. So, but yeah, that was my path. I'm a triple gator. I got all my degrees at the University of Florida, and so that's why it was kind of easy to come back and say yes. Who doesn't want to go back to their alma mater and build a professional development program? So I absolutely loved it. I spoke with a few PhD students this morning, and that's gonna be just kind of maybe like a little lesson is, if you do find yourself that you enjoy doing things other than research, if you do enjoy teaching and mentoring, there are opportunities in that, which I did not realize going through my PhD program. I realized that I had to discover it, but just know that there are opportunities. There are other universities who are hungry to build something what you're building with the academy.
Thank you very much, Max. Great question and answer. And yes, it has been great what you mentioned about the knowing from afar, from another department, what you built there at Central Michigan. I was able to see it. And our students, to their credit, are doing, not in the morning, but they are burning the, what is it, the candle?
The midnight oil.
Yes, the midnight oil. Yes, that's right. Thank you very much. Okay, so before we close, the last question, and then there might be some Q&As. Let me briefly note that our banking academy, it's still in its infancy, has benefited from the commitment of local bankers, which we're very thankful for that. Thank you very much. And insights from both of you, because I have reached out and you have been very helpful in making us think about how to improve. So for that, I'm very thankful. Thank you. Your example has helped shape our approach. So with that said, as briefly as you can you comment based on your experience, just gut reaction? So I'll go with Silvia first. Based on your experience in Europe and international collaborations, what lessons can you give us here for South Texas? What should educators and business leaders prioritize? Just gut reaction.
Okay. I will say the answer is linked to building a coordinated ecosystem grounded in your local realities. South Texas already benefits from committed financial institutions, an active community organizations, and a strong higher education presence. By aligning these efforts, it could not only improve financial knowledge, but also further support regional growth and broader participation in the broader economy. Okay? If we think about South Texas and the characteristics, well, you all know that your population is relatively young and growing, that many households navigate early stages in income formation, credit use, and long-term financial planning. And at the same time, we have that the median household income levels remain below the state and the national average. And while the estimates suggest that unbanked and underbanked rates can be relatively high. So, therefore, there exist gaps in financial knowledge and effective use of financial tools. But at the same time, okay, you have already very good foundations. Financial institutions in the region, for example, IBC, have implemented financial education workshops, social outreach programs, and small business support initiatives. And so do other institutions and organizations. Well, maybe the impact could be strengthened through greater coordination, continuity, and alignment across stakeholders. And just some insights about what we know that other countries have done and that has worked, okay? For example, in Australia, they have high levels of financial literacy. And this has been achieved through long-term strategies that integrate financial education into the school systems, supported by partnerships with financial institutions and digital tools. So here, the takeaway keyword here is consistency and looking long term. In Eastern European countries, they have done similarly with national strategies, and they have been able to increase the levels of financial literacy. And up north here in Canada, this is a particularly relevant case. Through the leadership of the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, working with other institutions and associations through community-based accessible programs, they have been able to raise financial literacy, and especially for those vulnerable groups. So, for me, okay, there is a consistent conclusion that seems to emerge. Progress is driven by coordinated, not only in financial literacy, usually in almost everything. When we work together, we do it better, right? So, coordination, sustained and locally implemented strategies focused on practical outcomes. So, connecting and coordinating existing efforts, okay? Looking long term, okay? Thinking about the local needs, making use of the universities that play a critical role, and engaging our young people, okay? So that they can also participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. So it seems that you have learned quite a bit about South Texas in your trip here. You have been here for 3 or 4 days, I think so.
Since last Friday. I loved it.
All right, fantastic, fantastic. And again, all this is being recorded, so we will follow suit. Thank you very much for those insights, Silvia. Max, likewise, if you were to build a program today in a region like South Texas, what would be your top priority in year one, or top priorities?
To focus on the leading indicators, right? So we have leading indicators who will tell us what's coming. You may have, oftentimes programs focus on lagging indicators. They'll say, well, let's have 100% placement rate. Let's have an internship high placement rate or starting salaries. That is lagging. That's going to follow. You want to focus on the leading indicators. What is it that's going to drive the success? It is going to be behavior based, and so you need to be looking at the behavior. Industry engagement, I'll keep emphasizing that. So for the students, if you're a student here, raise your hand. Let's see how many students we have. All right, so Luis, look at this. See how many hands we have for students? Okay, good. How about if you're an industry professional, raise your hand. If you're an industry professional, let's see those hands. All right, so you see for the students, I'm seeing at least a 1-to-1 ratio here. So you can walk out with a connection, and most of them are willing to talk to more than one student, so you can really walk out with multiple connections. And I would say that in year one and afterward, but definitely in year one, you just want to focus on that, fostering that industry engagement, because for the students, that's how you'll gain mentoring opportunities, that's how you'll gain employment opportunities. And that's what's going to keep the industry folks coming back, because they're here at the end of the day to engage you, to help the program, to help the college. And so, but it's going to be all on engagement. So you want to make it more, of a metric. You just kind of identify those. How many engagements are you planning to do this year? How often the folks show up? But this conference in itself, I think, is a home run, and so kudos to you for hosting it. Again, it's going to be, this is a leading indicator of excellence that is continue to come.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much, Max. And so, without mentioning all the names, but we will have next week a Banking Academy Advisory Council, and I hope that they will be very happy about this conference too, and all those comments, and plenty of advice, by the way, based upon your words. Hopefully we will be taking notes and bouncing off ideas, and this is about, again, keeping curious and be collaborative. So at this point, I think that we have just a few minutes for Q&A. How does that work? So can somebody raise their hands, please? I think that there are some hands there. And over here, please, over here for the next one.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And I think that here in Texas, we are heading in the right direction because some of the courses or some of the universities are taking the FIN 3311, which is personal finance, as a part of the program. It's not yet mandatory, but it's optional for the rest of the. I'm teaching that course, and it's interesting because I have pretty much 70% not a business students and the other business student, and sometimes I have the no business students a little bit more involved because they know that eventually they are going to. We know in this course we cover bank checking, credit cards, auto loans. I mean, it's every single chapter is in some ways is going to be involved in the student, in the future of the student. The point is that the work is there and is heading to the, to increase the knowledge of our students. On the other side, they probably realize that they require, for example, discipline to make payments on time and so on. And there are a lot of things that I have to learn in the process. But you have mentioned that Max, you mentioned that skills are very important in any part of the process, whether it is hiring, whether it is you're operating, whatever it is in the banking industry. But I think that we have to, bring today, this time, how the ethics are going to work in all these things. Because remember, if you are in the banking industry, nobody's going to believe you if they perceive that there is problem with the ethics. And on the other hand, if you are cheating to your bank about your income or whatever it is, you are going to have legal problems. So can you mention how we can bring in this particular situation that we have heading into the what we call the bank committee, how we can bring this particular topic? As you already know, some of the most important certification of their CFA, CFP, and so on, they have a specific module to address the ethics. Can you elaborate a little bit more about this connection? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that's a tough one to fix ethics. It's and as you mentioned, CFA is trying to address it, and it's a very important part. In fact, it's the only section that if you don't pass, you fail. You can not pass other sections, but if your ethics is high, they look at the average. So I would say the one thing that's important that gets misunderstood is that ethics and integrity are not fixed about individuals. Sometimes we feel like this student does not have integrity, and this one has, and that's it. It's not true, and I've seen it with students. I've seen it with myself. I mean, I've cut corners on quizzes. You said this has been recorded, so that was just a dream. But then I see when we emphasize the importance of it, that's what we need. That's when we grow. And integrity, it's not a student not cheating on exam because they're afraid of getting caught. That is not integrity. If anything, going for it and cheating exemplifies some courage maybe, right? So if anything. So integrity is not that. Integrity is when you can cheat and you're choosing not to. And so for the students, it's like when you know you can get away with it, you can get ahead, but you're choosing not to, that's integrity. And some students are at the point that they already have it, and kudos to you. If you feel like you're not at that point yet, you can work on that, but you need to understand the importance of it. And you described the importance of it, but it's just a message that needs to be repeated. It's going to be on the industry, on your industry partners, on the college to keep emphasizing that and get the students to want to grow in that respect. So that I'm just going to emphasize is do not take it as a given, like as a fixed. It's very much you can grow in that sense. You just need to emphasize it. You may have you could bring in a speaker that's going to be. We had in our MBA program we had someone who was in prison, and then he kind of owned it, and he's a motivational speaker and talks about how he's grown. So it's a very tough one to solve, but just because it's hard doesn't mean we don't do that. And so I'm glad you bring it up, and it's going to be up to Luis really and his team to figure out how to do that.
Thank you very much, Max. Silvia, would you like to weigh in?
Well, I completely agree. For me, we should have an ethics course, okay? And we should teach ethics and, well, maybe bring someone from humanities to explain well what ethics is. And so, for example, in my bachelor's degree at my university, we don't teach ethics, okay? So I think this is not something that that's good. I teach an ethics course in research. I also think that we should teach ethics in research to our PhD students. And in finance, another thing that I think we should teach more is economic and financial history, because we repeat the same errors all over, and we see this with the crisis that we have. So I think we should also have memory. So ethics and memory are two things that I will emphasize more in our curriculum.
Thank you very much, Silvia. I think that we have a question here.
Hi, good afternoon. Rene Arriaga from IBC Bank. First and foremost, congratulations, great presentation. This is a lot of information that, back to your point, I think all of us should be educated. My question to you all, in your opinion, I look back, and I've been in 30 years in banking, but I look back at my elementary, my middle school, and my high school. In your opinion, do you feel that the school districts should consider to have courses, back to your point about education, should we make them mandatory now to have a better feeling and be more educated in finance? To both of you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm a believer so in financial education, so the answer is going to be yes, right? But what the evidence shows us is that when financial education is not just part of math or of the math course or just part of the economics course, okay? When there is a financial education course, then it works better. And in other countries, they have it in the school curricula, and we should start early on with the kids. They should, it's not, well, you can learn it when you go to university, but if you start early on, it's much better. So I do think that financial education is very important and should be part of the school curriculum. And actually, the OECD recommends this also.
Yeah, no, Silvia makes a good point that it's not the math behind it. Is oftentimes it's psychological and behavioral, right? Dave Ramsey makes that point. He's like, it's not a math problem. And if it were a math problem, we could solve it easily. I will say, so I'm not as experienced as Silvia, but I'm teaching personal finance to our student athletes, because now with NIL, the problem is they'll get the money and then they'll buy sports cars and they start to blow it. Again, it's behavioral. And so in preparing for teaching the class, just taught for the first year, I realized it's not what I thought it would be. They don't need to hear about all the Roth IRA and all the other retirement plans. Like, you need to focus on, don't waste the money right now. Understand that you're making a sacrifice today for your future self. You're 20 years old now, you're making a sacrifice for your 40-year-old self. I use myself as an example. And one exercise I have is for them we go around the room and everyone shares a vision of themselves when they're 40 years old. Because if you don't know whom you're sacrificing for, then you're not going to make that sacrifice now. Now, my point is just supporting what Silvia said, is it's not a math problem. And it's if you were to teach it to high schoolers or middle schoolers, it becomes very different and a lot harder. Like, I can't imagine asking a 12-year-old to describe a 40-year-old themselves, right? Or you definitely don't want to be talking to a Roth IRA at this point. They're not worried about taxes. And so you just have to be careful and be really good, especially if you want to have a requirement. In Florida, we just passed that law, so starting next year is the first year all seniors will have to have taken financial literacy course. If you're gonna do it, you need to be careful, because if you just kind of force the curriculum on the teachers, on the schools, they may grab something, like Silvia said, it's going to be like, I've seen some textbooks that are just really math heavy, and they're teaching you how to calculate time value of money. Like, okay, but it's not what will resonate with high schoolers and definitely not with middle schoolers. So you just have to be careful to get it right and understand what it is.
Thank you very much, Max, Silvia. As we like to say in the Sanchez School, we bridge academia and industry to drive student success. Events like this one, are important steps in that direction. Thank you all for being part of this conversation and for the work you do for South Texas and beyond. Please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists.
Thank you, Luis.
And by the way, we're going to give them the world, and so we have a gift for Silvia. So you can open it. Should. Okay. Okay. Well.
Or you want to give them?
Yeah, I will give it. And to Max, we're also offering the world.
I'm excited. I saw them give one to Peter yesterday. I was like, oh man, that's so awesome. And I did not think I was going to get one. So yes,
Let me help.
we can take them out.
Show our audience, yes. So is that a...
This is awesome. I absolutely love it. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you very much.